In this video, I'm going to cover some safety aspects when operating and using your generator. The placement of your generator is very important. Make sure the area is very well ventilated. Place the generator on a flat surface. Make sure the area is dry. The generator should not be used in the rain. It's also best not to put the generator in the blazing sun. Do not leave the fuel can anywhere near the generator. Allow at least 2 meters on each side of the generator for ventilation. However, if a generator is going to be placed near a brick wall or masonry surface, it can be placed quite close, as long as the intake and the exhaust areas are well ventilated. If you are going to place your generator in a garage, always face the exhaust to the open air or the open door. Do not smoke near the generator or have any open flames. No young children or animals should be able to get to the generator. Never refuel a generator while it is running. If you do need to refuel a generator, switch it off, allow it to cool down for at least 10 minutes before refueling. Open this cap slowly to allow the tank to depressurize. Use a funnel when filling up the petrol. Do not overfill the petrol because the petrol can expand while the generator is in operation. If you've spilt any fuel, wipe it away before starting the generator. If you're not going to be using the generator for an extended period of time, or if you're going to be transporting the generator, empty the tank. Also, some generators do not like old fuel. These petrol generators require unleaded petrol of 87 octane or higher. On the chassis of every generator is an earth point. Make sure the earth point is electrically connected to an earth spike in the nearby vicinity of the generator. There's the earth point on this generator, and here it is on this one. Here's an example of a generator being earthed. The earth wire is connected to a nearby copper rod. That copper rod is hammered into the ground for earthing. When using your generator, do not run it at more than 75% of its rated maximum wattage. For example, this says 5 kVA. But actually it's a 4 kilowatt generator, which means I should not connect more than 3 kilowatts to this generator. In the case of the smaller generator, it's rated at 3000 watts. Do not exceed a load of more than 2.2 kilowatts for this smaller generator. When plugging in your appliances, just be mindful of the maximum power output of the generator. For example, this is only a small appliance, but in terms of its power consumption, it's very high for its size. It has a heating element which consumes a lot of power. If I plug in this kettle into this generator, it will load this generator heavily. Just because the generator says 3000 watts does not mean that the generator can provide a continuous output of 3000 watts. Most generators used in domestic applications should not be loaded more than 75%. So in this case, a 2 kilowatt kettle is close to the maximum continuous rating of this generator. Therefore, when plugging in your appliances, consider a stepwise approach. For example, if I want to plug in a fan and then maybe another fan and then switch on a TV and then a floodlight, it's better to plug them in one by one. You can also listen to the sound of the generator and it can give you an indication of how it's operating. When a generator gets overloaded, it makes like a gurgling sound. Sounds a little bit like this. If I had to plug in this kettle and then plug in this microwave, it would overload the generator. The generator will probably stall and there may be some resultant damage. Some devices might only have a low power consumption. For example, this floodlight is only 150 watts, but LED floodlights have a very high inrush current, which means that as soon as they turn on, their initial current is much higher, many times higher than the running current. That is why it's best to switch on one appliance, wait a little bit, and then switch on another appliance and wait a little bit. In terms of a small generator, you will need to unplug one appliance in order to plug in another appliance. Many generators are fitted with a lead acid battery to have a battery start. Often these batteries go flat and they no longer work. In the case of this generator, the battery has been removed. That means that there would have been bare wires. So if there are any bare wires on your generator, make sure they are strapped and put out of the way. A generator should be used as an isolated circuit and it should always be earthed. Never plug your generator directly into the mains or any plug outlet in your home. For example, some people have tried to plug their generator into the outlet thinking that their other outlets in their home will energize. This is an extremely dangerous practice and should never be done. Use the generator as an isolated source. That means I plug into my generator and my appliances will only be connected to that generator and nothing else. When the generator is running, do not touch the wires near the battery or the wires near the starter. When the generator is running, some of the surfaces can get very hot, and if you need to move the generator, allow it to cool down for at least 10 minutes. Generators cannot run indefinitely. That means that one has to determine how long the generator can run before it needs to be switched off to allow it to rest. In the user manual, it will say, maybe it'll say 8 hours, maybe it'll say 6 hours. So please check the user manual to see how long the generator can be run before it needs to be turned off, rested, before it can be turned on again. On the front of the generator is a circuit breaker. Make sure that it is in the off position. I've also unplugged any appliances. Make sure the generator has oil. I can do an oil check on the side here, but I can only do this if the generator has been sitting for at least 15 minutes. Make sure there is sufficient oil in the tank. Notice that the oil level is just below the H mark, the high level. It should be at least above the L mark. Make sure there is fuel in the fuel tank. The fuel should be fresh fuel. On the side of the generator, there's a fuel tap. Make sure it is in the open position. Fuel can now flow into the carburetor. I now have to close the choke. On this particular generator, I have to pull a lever. Here is the view of me closing the choke. On some generators, it's a lever that needs to be turned. In this case, I'm closing the choke. On the front of the unit, I have a key to start it. I put it in the on position. If I'm going to be using a battery start, meaning there's a battery that starts the unit, I will then turn this further past the on position and the unit will go trying to start. In this case, the battery is flat, so I'm going to do a manual start. In order to start the unit, I have to pull on this rope. I have to pull it quite vigorously, but keeping in mind that this must not be pulled at an acute angle. I have to pull it so that the nylon is pretty much coming out of the hole in the middle. If I pull it like that or like this, the nylon will eventually snap. When I pull this, I actually lean back at the same time. Now you might notice it's got quite a rough idle. That is because the choke is still closed. I can now either put the choke in all the way or push it half the way in and let it run for about 30 seconds. On this unit there's no middle point, so the choke now goes all the way in and the generator is now warming up. Check the voltage level indicator to make sure it's at the correct voltage. I can now plug in my first appliance. Close the circuit breaker. Remember that the generator must not be put at its maximum load shortly after being started. Allow it to have enough time to warm up. If you do need to run the generator at a high load, make sure you never exceed 75% of the max rated wattage. If you're going to be unplugging your load, best to switch off the generator shortly afterwards. Don't allow the generator to run for very long periods of time with no load attached. If your generator has a battery connected to it and it has a battery start, I'll demonstrate what you need to do. If you follow all the same procedures, remember to open the fuel valve, close the choke. Instead of using the manual puller, I can just press this button. This will start the generator. I try to start the generator by pressing it down. Never hold the button in for more than 5 seconds. If your generator does not successfully start, wait 10 seconds before trying again. If you press the button and your generator only does this, it's not quite turning over the engine, then your battery is flat and you'll need to charge it. In this case, you'll need to use the manual puller to start your generator. To stop the generator, please do as follows. Switch off all your appliances. Put the circuit breaker into the off position or push it down. Turn off the generator by turning the key, or if it's a push button generator, switch the button to the off position. If the switch on the front of your generator has more than 2 positions, just make sure it's at the 0 position or the off position. You can now close the fuel valve. If your generator has been running with a high load, say for example 75% of its maximum rated load, disconnect all the loads, let the generator get back to its normal idle and then let it run for about 2 minutes. This will cool down the engine without the load attached. You only need to do this step if the generator is running close to its maximum just prior to you switching it off. If you try to start your generator about 3 or 4 times and it still will not start, it may be flooded. Move the choke from the closed position to the open position. Wait a minute or 2, then try and start it again. If it still does not start, reclose the choke and try and start it 2 more times. If it still does not start, consider sending your generator in for a service. A faulty generator sometimes makes a loud bang when trying to start it. Just consider wearing ear protection when trying to work with such a generator. Thanks for watching and cheers.